Hey, what's up, CO302, writing in digital environments. We've got basically 2 or 3 goals that we're going to get through today. And the first one is to discuss the forum that was due yesterday or Wednesday on McCloud's reading, particularly how his idea of the 6 steps of the creative process or of a product is on page 170 and 171 of McCloud's Understanding Comics. The idea, form, idiom, structure, craft, and surface. Kind of why I gave that to you as a kind of curveball, sideways way to think about your final project. And then I want to look at the draft of your final project assignment so that you can see kind of what that looks like. I also want to end by sharing one article that I found, although there are a lot of different articles that are coming up on what to do if you are graduating in May of 2020, which is kind of a fascinating question. And honestly, the advice that I've gotten or that I think is applicable there is applicable for everyone, even if you're graduating 2 years out. So that's kind of what I was hoping to do. We're going to go over McCloud, go over your final project requirements as I have them now, answer some questions about that, and then look at this other article and explore some resources about what to do, how to make the most out of quarantine, and maybe talk a little bit about that. I'm trying not to use the word quarantine because it sounds worse than shelter in place, but I just did it anyway. All right, let's do this. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. Okay, so I'm actually going to back up to Forum 11, which is your reading notes over McCloud. I am really hoping, one, that we begin more, as much as we can, to try to make your notes visually accessible using white space, thinking about paragraphing and organizing things. That's why we're reading Cleon and McCloud. And so I know there's a lot of theory in these chapters that hopefully we can put into play when we make our, when we begin making more of our website. But it was this was Shay's question about, I kind of get this in an abstract way, but how I put this into play with my project and how my project is going to be integrated into my e-portfolio, I'm kind of lost on. And honestly, that's a very understandable response, partially because I intentionally made this come from the side to have you think about what your final project would be. Obviously, the form is the form that your final project's going to take. The idiom, I honestly think of idiom as like a language or the kind of jargon that you're going to use. The idiom, if you're writing a letter to your little brother, is going to be different than if you're writing an academic journal. It's going to be different if you're writing to a professional audience or if you're just making the website for yourself. The structure is going to be what the kind of the format or how the thing that you're making is built. The craft is the process of making that thing. Where do you start? What do you do next? What do you do after that? And then the surface is how it's going to look when it's all done. I think the best way to understand that is to actually look at this, your final project. So this is due on Wednesday of week 15, and this is what I'm calling a long form web text project that is something that takes time to put together that is going to help you get better at doing what you want to do in some kind of a way that's challenging and also self-directed. First thing you're going to notice is there's a lot of, we're going to have 3 different workshops. So we're going to spend a lot of time working on this project after we do the reading, and your website is going to house your project. So I know this was confusing before and some people had this question. Your final project is not the website. Your website is going to house this final project, and your final project is going to take a lot of different, oh boy, cat stuck in the door. That's, maybe we should address that. Okay, fine. Yeah, you're very helpful. Yeah, very helpful indeed. Okay, so you are going to, in terms of the form that you're making, in fact, why don't I just do this way? Let me make this clear. The genre is the form that your project is going to take. And we went over some ideas earlier on in the semester, but your final project could take a lot of different forms. One, it could be a media-rich, researched argument essay. So you could basically make an argument like you were going to write in an advanced writing class and do your research and then put different media in it, like add more pictures and use your integration of visuals and text. It could be some kind of an annotated static image gallery where you're actually having some kind of like a book, like a picture book in some case, but you're giving annotations to those pictures in a way that you're kind of emphasizing images and then doing something with those images in some kind of a longer form instead of, instead of just one picture and an image, you might have a series of pictures with a series of writings that does something in the long term. If you want to get better at video editing, you might make a video essay. I talked to Shay a little bit about that, and I'm going to recommend two different people that make video essays, namely the Nerd Writer is the one that I really like. What was the name? What was the one that you said, Shay?
I've been watching the Wendover Productions
How do you
a
spell
lot.
that?
Wendover, and then just Productions.
Wendover Productions, and they kind of go behind the scenes on how things are made, the process of things.
Sort of like it's just like he'll like go into like logistical like travel of NFL teams, like the logistical like of this like super remote airport and how it's like important or like what it does.
Awesome.
So
So, and that's interesting that it is logistics, because that's something you could focus on, is a logistics of making something that you want to make. If that's a computer program or a song or a podcast or something like that. And that is another one that you could do. I've had students do a really good podcast episode as their final project, where they've kind of submitted not only the audio of the podcast, but also some image to go along with the podcast and some written description about it. You could do more of a documentary video or like a video log, like a Casey Neistat type vlog where you're just kind of documenting a process on something. This next one is very interesting, that if you want to do something that's specific to your discipline, so if you are a journalist, you might want to do some investigative journalism about something. If you are in computer science, you might want to do some kind of a coding project. I think a lot of people, not a lot of people, but I remember getting some really good, basically an extended blog post that is an annotated list of the coolest and best things. I don't know if you remember Garrett's example where he was kind of starting to compile a list of the best producers to learn from.
mm-hmm.
I could imagine that being extended out. So he has like this big long list, and now all of a sudden his final project is, hey, if you want to be a producer, here is this giant document for you of everyone you should be learning from. I also like this example because ideally your blogs week on week are working towards, or at least keeping in mind, this final project. So you're already begin thinking about like, well, what am I going to do if I'm going to create a podcast? What are the steps that I need to take? You might also do a PowerPoint or expand on, do an additional PowerPoint. I'm going to have you do a PowerPoint regardless, just because I think it's a good exercise to think about the sequence of images and words. But you might want to do another one or make a video based on a PowerPoint in your own way. I had a student make a brochure really well that they kind of were advocating for something. They were a business that did nutritional counseling. And so for their final project, they made a nice 3-panel brochure that was like a very visually appealing sell, basically, for them. That goes along with like a small ebook, so on and so forth. In any case, I wanted you to start thinking about it because I'm going to ask you in 2 weeks on what you're on, basically to submit a proposal of what you want to do for your final project and what you want your final project to do. I.e., you're going to identify a rhetorical situation. Who's your audience? What are they looking for? How is this project going to help them? And again, we're going to look at it in 3 different ways. You might have like a more academic audience. So you're actually kind of writing to get into grad school, or you're just writing to fulfill the requirements of this class and you're going to delete your portfolio as soon as it's over. That's fine. Or you might have a more professional audience, like, hey, I'm actually trying to use this to get some computer science coding jobs, and so I'm doing that. It must be viewable online, but you don't have to put it on your website. So I had a couple students that wanted to keep their blog portfolio as just a blog, and they didn't want to put their PowerPoint up there, and they didn't want to put their creative project on there, and that's fine. You know, ultimately your website is yours for what you want to do with it. And then we're basically going to be working on this in 2 weeks from now. So what is that? Next week is April 6th. Basically from April 20th through the end of the semester, or April 13th through the end of the semester, we're going to be working on this alongside the other work that we have. So this is kind of like the big work. You are identifying a rhetorical purpose given your situation. You're ideally extending your rhetorical knowledge, so what you know of that area, that discipline, into this, and that you're going to extend your experience in writing and composing and use these recursive strategies mean that you're going back over your work, to kind of make it better over and over again within the website. And you are going to do a self-assessment. I'm going to rely on your self-assessment again to kind of give me a baseline for what you did well and what you didn't. I've been really impressed with your self-assessments as a class so far. And then the rest of this assignment just identifies that you are kind of writing this for me and seeing how well you met the big purpose goals for the course. But it's also a process for you to reflect and learn about something you want to learn about. And this is going to come up in the last thing I'm going to say in our class today about how to make the most out of our shelter-in-place time. But ideally, you pick something that is going to be challenging enough and interesting enough to you that you're going to be able to learn something from doing it. That's why you are one of the primary audiences for this. And just a note on what I'm looking for. This says 10 double-space pages, but I'm going to say 7 to 10. I think it's more realistic to think about if you were going to write a really good essay. That's what I want the comparable. That's kind of what you're looking for. So this is like a term paper, but given this is a class on writing in digital environments, I don't know how well academic arguments really track to writing in digital environments. So I kind of want to give you the option of making something that it works for you. That brings us back to the question that I had initially had you think about in a strange way. And we should have included the first one, the idea or purpose of what you're doing. What's the kind of thing that you're doing? What's the idea behind your final project? What form is it going to take? i.e., is it a podcast, video, essay, narrative, a narrative story, something else that you want to do that wasn't in that list? What kind of language are you going to use? Is it going to be professional, personal? What kind of structure is it going to have? Are you going to introduce it and then build on it and then have a conclusion? Or is there going to be no introduction? What's your craft or your process of how you're going to make it? And what's the surface? How's it going to look at the end? It's kind of a long-winded way of thinking about just what are you making? And given you have kind of 2 weeks to think about what that is. Does that make sense? I'll just talk for a long time. Thumbs up?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Any questions on like a scale of 1 to 5? How clear are you on what you want to do for this?
Like a 7-ish.
Yeah. All right. So we're good.
I mean, it's only 2 of us, but
Yeah.
still.
Well, I mean, ideally, since we're doing in an asynchronous class, I'm hoping, you know, some people will be able to watch this and get, as they say, 3 is the magic number. This is all we need to do this. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
Let's move on. What the should we be doing with our time? This is just one article that I found, and it's not the one I was looking for that I sent to myself, and I couldn't find this. But it's things that you could consider doing if you're going to graduate. This focus on your circle of control. That's nice. It's like the things that you can control. I'm going to skip this. I really actually think 2 through 4 are interesting, and I want to expand on 2. I think this is really limiting, and this is from a civil engineering perspective, that this is just talking about online learning in the context of a class, but it's so much bigger than that. And I guess this kind of connects to finding a mentor and to reading books and to volunteering to help those in need. This is a very interesting one. I think you could, if you are of capacity to do that, not only are you going to be helping other people, what a great thing to put on your resume moving forward. Like, hey, remember that time when everyone was scared that the world was going to end? I was delivering laptops to children who needed it. Or I don't know, you know what I mean? Like, or I was participating in an engineering project. The coolest thing I heard yesterday on NPR was a profile of this piston maker who was refitting all of their manufacturing line to make the pistons that they need for ventilators, and how they got the email on Saturday morning and they were like all excited they basically got all of their engineers in one remote place, and they basically made it happen. Anyway, I think like finding ways to help is good, could be very good for you in the long term, as long as you're staying safe and healthy, which is another whole interesting wrinkle of all this. Okay. What I wanted to say, what the other article did better, is talking about online learning, mainly in terms of skill acquisition. And this connects to your final project. What skills could you get that would be marketable? And could you develop those skills on your own time? Most people, this is going to be different for different people. And I wonder, have you guys heard of lynda.com? Lynda?
Yeah, Lynda.
Boom. Okay, if you haven't, boom. Not only are they offering a free month trial, which is convenient, you also have free access to this through the CSU library. And if you are a Poudre Valley, Poudre District, whatever, PoudreValleyLibraries.com, you should be able to sign in to Lynda using either library account. And what's interesting here, if you notice, there is 600 courses on software development. There's 700 courses in design, 700 courses in web development, 700 courses in photography, 1,200 courses in business. And they do have, these are all kind of more, maybe a little bit more focused on Access 2006, on specific things. What I was thinking about this in just terms of like the most basic that I would encourage people to do is Excel. Like, honestly, if you are entering the job force when you graduate and you can't say that I'm pretty good at Excel, and the next person to you says like, oh yeah, Excel's easy. Like, I can show you like a multi-tab Excel spreadsheet that I ran data analytics on multiple columns and blah, 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 blah. Who are you going to hire? You're going to hire the person that has Excel, right? I mean, so it's honestly, one of the interesting things for me is that you can get a college degree in a discipline and not know how to use Excel. Like, I don't know. I feel like these skill-based, technology-based things would be super helpful. Let's say you want to get better at Photoshop. There's tons of courses on that. Let's say you want to get better at Illustrator. Tons of classes on that. Let's say you want to get better at Final Cut. or Premiere. That's what I want to get better at. I'm afraid. Point being, all this software takes a long time to learn, and hey, guess what? That's what we have now. So they also sort it. I mean, this site's just is awesome. So I think my biggest advice is not just think about being proficient in online learning and finding a mentor, but using these resources that you have just because you are part of the library to really get some skills that you might be able to use or that you want for your personal reasons. And lynda.com is probably the best one. Finding people on LinkedIn and reaching out to them is another way that you could make the most out of this. So pulling this all together, ideally, let's say you want to make a video documentary. You're totally interested in that. Hey, look, video interview tips. That's even with a misspelled video. How to stop video. Excellent. I hope that you kind of get better at finding the resources that are available to you and actually taking advantage of them. That's what I feel like what we can do during this time, and connecting with other people, maybe doing some radical collaborations. That's what I'm trying to do musically. Just get music to different people and collaborate that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
You guys have any ideas of what you'd want to use Lynda for?
I don't know yet, but probably check random stuff out, get a feel.
Yeah. Obviously, it might not be as pressing if you're not going to graduate, but if you are going to graduate and you're freaking out, I think being able to show initiative that you're learning and figuring stuff out. I still love Austin Kleon's page in Steal Your Work, or Steal Like an Artist, when he's just has the just Google it, yo. Like there's so much to that now.
Yeah.
So I hope that helps. And I hope that you're I think reading Kleon and McCloud back to back is a really good exercise in seeing what works in online communication. McCloud is a lot harder to read after reading Kleon. Kleon's like the easiest author to read in the history of writing.
Yep.
So I hope that the website revisions are going well and that you're trying to make it as easy as possible for your audience. Cool?
Cool.
Yep.
I hope that helps. As always, I'm available if you need. And I hope you're staying healthy and not reading the news all the time.
I limit myself to like once in the morning and then don't look at the news ever again for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I had to look today. I did too much in the morning. Yeah, I think that's true. At night, it really doesn't seem helpful.
No.
Nope.
I refuse to look at anything news related after like 9.
Yeah, I think that's a good play. The Goldman Sachs Hank Paulson, I think his name is. He was on NPR this morning too. He said that the people that fare well in these kinds of environments actually disengage from the environments and focus on the work they have to do. Which makes sense. Makes sense. It's easier said than done, though. I know. I was like, I'm going to wake up and do my journal. And this morning I was like, oh, what's going on?
It's weird. I've like never been as like exhausted as I am like just during this period. Like even though I'm not doing anything, it's just like oddly exhausting.
Do you think that's because you're thinking about what to do?
And not just doing what you normally do.
Yeah, I feel like when we bought our first property, I learned how taxing deciding is, the decision-making process. Mm-hmm. We were like looking at properties and trying to make a decision of whether or not to buy one. And then I'm like, man, I am exhausted after an hour of that. And then I learned that that's like that's very high functioning. Trying to make a decision that's going to last a long time, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe it's just like we're just exhausted anyway.
I think that's a good point, though. Before all this, we just had a general schedule and routine to
Yeah.
follow, and now we're just
You're like, okay, what should I do? Well, already you're losing. You're burning calories that you could otherwise. Yeah, house cleaning is taking a whole nother level for me. I'm like, all right, time for the dishes. I can do this.
Yeah.
So, well, I think I might start a little laundry and feel better about myself.
Sounds good.
All right,
I have shared laundry in the apartment, so it's always
Ooh.
kind of like stressful to do laundry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And with one door in and one door out.
Yeah.
So, have you found your optimal time where nobody uses it?
Usually like late at night or like
Early
early
in the morning. Yeah.
But me and my roommate, we just like have hand sanitizer in our pockets. So
Yep.
like after every action in the laundry room, we just hand sanitize.
Yeah.
That's good.
Are you
idea.
using the homemade face masks yet?
No, I don't have anything to make a homemade face mask, I don't think.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure that I do either.
I mean, it depends how much fun you want to have with it, because like,
right.
I like
a t-shirt.
Yeah, old
no,
t-shirt.
I was thinking more like I was thinking about it being my project for this class was finishing up this thing, like full on Iron Man helmet I wanted to make, and just like putting filters in this mouthpiece right there, and you know, if we have to wear masks, be cool to have a helmet rather than a mask.
Dude, that's the most newsworthy thing that's happened all morning. Let's I can imagine that on NPR, local class disseminates do you have like what is it called? Like the design plans for the Iron Man mask. And then the subtitle would be, if we're gonna wear masks, we might as well be Iron Man while we do it.
See, I was thinking about more of like, let's just skip right into like the Blade Runner cyberpunk sort of helmets and robot parts hanging off you. That's what excites me.
I'm glad you found something exciting, Jeff. And in fact,
Yes.
that kind of made my morning. Though it's also terrifying to imagine people walking around with those masks.
Yeah.
But I don't let that dissuade you, man. Be an artist.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the howling at 8 p.m. movement? I hesitate to share it. I just talked to my mom yesterday, and she's like, "Have you heard about the howling at 8 p.m.?" And I was like, no." And she's like, "Well, that's good because it sucks. We go to bed at 7, and then all these people around us are like howling at 8 p.m. as a show of collective solidarity, and it wakes the dogs up and it wakes us up." And I'm like, "Oh, Mom." Maybe I'll join their Facebook group and tell them to stop it. But then I didn't want to invite any. Sorry, everybody. Stop. Will you stop howling? Well,
before the class gets out, I had a question about the presentation in our documentation.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know about everyone else, but I'm trying to make that game right now, which is more of a product.
Yes.
And if anyone else is making a product,
yeah,
the like advertising writing around it, I'm not sure how much we should bar from our documentation just so we have something unique for the final presentation.
Got it.
And if you have any suggestions for that.
Yeah, I think as much as you could do to make it accessible for us. So I want you to consider multiple audiences is the main thing I would suggest. So you have an interesting opportunity to kind of showcase in writing what it is that you're doing as a separate kind of a thing, so that you're kind of bringing us up to speed, if you will. Like, I don't know what you're talking about really. So like, if you could help us understand that, I don't think you need to go overboard in documenting every little thing. So I really like your question because there's a gray area there. I'm really not sure. I would document as much as you can without it seeming completely overkill. And then from there, revise it to take only what you really need.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I would do multiple drafts of it. Just try to document and keep track of your process. If you have a realization that you want to integrate, or you made some kind of big movement or progress, I would take a note of that. But then when you end up presenting, or you have this textual component to your project, you could probably just decide, you know what, people don't need to see this, and just delete.
Okay.
But they do need to see this. I'm going to say more about that.
Okay.
Great question.
And kind of something I don't expect to get an answer to, but do you have any suggestions on copyright issues?
Oh, awesome. So good. We need to get to that, and I'm glad that you said that. I do, and it's basically, when in doubt, don't use it. Songs, and it's so interesting because it depends on what kind of a thing you're making. In general, unless you have the permission of someone to use their stuff, you shouldn't use it. That being said, I can share my screen one more time, and because I did want to show you Unsplash is great for images, static images. I'm not sure if that's really what you're talking about, but there's a repository. Hey, there you go. There's a repository of so many different images up here that you can just search, that are all by virtue of being on here. You know, I actually really like this one. When I download it, it gives you a, and you do need to create an account, but it's free. It gives you how to basically give them attribution. Creative Commons is the other one that is a little bit older and not as sleek. Unsplash is just for photos, but Creative Commons is better because it has everything on it in terms of, I'll show you when this comes up. You can not only search for images, but you should be able to, here you go. You can look at music, photos, educational material, art, and I do think they have video you can use. I think they have other like coding and other kinds of discipline specific stuff as well that you can search by. So again, this site is great because you know that the people that post on it are okay with you using their stuff. And the distinction on it is that some people allow you to remix their stuff. So this photographer might really not want me to put the word mule over the top of it. And so they change it to say, you can use my stuff, but don't mix it, don't mess with it. Or some people just release it and say, you can do whatever you want with it. Other people say, and we've done this with our music, if you can do whatever you want with it, but if you're going to profit from it, actually you can't profit from it. So don't use it in something that you're going to sell. Otherwise, you can use it as much as you want. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
The other part of the question is copyright law is changing all the time. And there's a fair use for copyright law, that you can use things if they are for educational purposes in a lot of different ways. So I need to do more research on that because it is changing. In fact, there's a huge area of scholarship of what you can and can't use and why and under what terms. I guess in the guideline is, when in doubt, don't use it or ask permission to use it. And always attribute your sources. So tell everybody where you got it. People, just like in an essay, I shouldn't open your essay and wonder whose work it is. Everything that's not yours, it should be clear that it's not yours. Same thing with your website. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's going to depend
I mean-
on so many circumstances.
I mean, what if there's significant precedent of allowing this exact activity, but there's not as much documentation for the other products that already exist?
Because you're making a product.
Yes. Well, I mean, if it does become a product, for right now, should I not include some information that would then say it is this thing rehashed?
I mean, honestly, I would be safe about trying to include that information.
Okay.
As soon as you go to, if you're actually going to go to market with what you have, now you're looking at copyright infringement. So someone could sue you for taking their stuff that they made, their intellectual property.
Mm-hmm.
And still, if you make a YouTube video and you use someone else's song, it's going to get flagged. And the algorithms are really good about that now to try to protect creators. So it's a big gray area. It's a big gray area, man. I think I would play it on the safe side, but honestly, each discipline and each situation is kind of its own thing.
Okay.
Great question. Was there something else?
No, not really.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our lesson. I'm going to stop the recording and bid you all a good weekend of independent learning and reading.
You as well.
All right. Thanks for checking in.
Yep. Bye.
See ya.
Sure. See ya.